Tonight, I am going to talk about the third chapter of the book Delog. And this chapter is titled Potala Mountain, the Pure Realm of Avalokiteshvara. And it starts out with describing the realm, and it is very accurate. And this would be good, actually, to study, to understand the visualization when we do Chenrezig, and also the visualization of the Pure Land that we do in the Nyungne practice. And in fact, in this chapter, the Nyungne practice is mentioned a lot. So the details are good to know. I'm not going to go into everything that is talked about in terms of the description, but it starts out by mentioning that it is southeast of Bodh Gaya, and that is a place in India where the Buddha was enlightened. And this is really an indicative description, not definitive. So that's important to know this, that from an ultimate point of view, it has no location, it is everywhere. So don't solidify these pure realms. But this is indicative, it's pointing. You might say it's pointing at the truth, but it is not the absolute truth. And just to go over some of the details, that it's full of flowers, wish-fulfilling trees made out of precious jewels, springs of nectar. And that nectar kind of jumped out at me. And what it doesn't explain is this the nectar from a God realm, or is this what would be described as Yeshe Dutse, which is wisdom nectar from a pure realm? Personally, I would go with the idea of being Yeshe Dutse, nectar from a pure realm. Beings that are born in this pure realm are born on flowers, and that the concept of suffering does not exist. Not only is suffering non-existent, but even the concept is missing. So there is just immeasurable bliss and happiness of all the beings that reside there. If you are born there, you will never be reborn in samsara again, even if you are not fully enlightened. And the reason is that once you are born there, because of the sound of Dharma being proclaimed basically constantly from all kinds of sources, that you quickly progress on the path and do become fully enlightened. When you want to make offerings, they miraculously appear in great numbers. So beings are constantly making offerings to Chenrezig and his retinue. There are male and female bodhisattvas in great numbers there. And here they were described as having a stable level of realization. To explain this a little bit more, I'm going to go to the word bhumi, which means ground or level. And there are a total of 11 of them, the 11th being complete Buddhahood. And frequently they are talked about being the 10 bhumis. And the 11th bhumi is kind of assumed to be present. Now, the first bhumi is the direct experience of emptiness. But the direct experience of emptiness at the first level is not stable. It comes and it goes. And as you progress along the bhumis, that recognition becomes more stable. And so it doesn't say exactly what level of bhumi is the minimum requirement to be considered a bodhisattva in this pure realm. But at least this gives you an idea of what is being expressed here. I would say that as at least a minimum, it would be the second bhumi or perhaps the third bhumi. In this realm now, the food is superior to the food of the God realms. The beings have beautiful clothes on, rainbow colored, and that is an indication that these are not the traditional monastic robes of monks and nuns in the tradition of Tibet, because they would not be multicolored rainbow like cloth. And the beings, what they do there is they listen to the teachings of Chenrezig, they make offerings to Chenrezig, partake in various pujas, feasts, and so forth. Now, she then starts describing his mansion there. And this is a very detailed description. And it follows the very detailed descriptions of the celestial palaces of the deities in advanced tantric practices. In the forearm Chenrezig and the short Amitabha practice that we do, these are either not, they don't even have a celestial palace, or if they do, it's very simple in description. Even in white Tara and green Tara, there is not a lot, at least not the detail in this depth of these celestial palaces. But when you get into the higher tantras, then you will find celestial palaces described like this, and perhaps even in more detail. The point being is that they are extraordinary places, palaces, and so forth, and have a lot of ornamentation and decoration and a lot of symbolism to all of this as well. So that's the important thing to remember. And of course, to a tantric practitioner, to be able to visualize these extremely detailed palaces requires a very high degree of meditative concentration. She comes to the west door and finds at that place a goddess of pristine awareness. And pristine awareness is primordial wisdom. Yeshe is the Tibetan word. Buddha nature, or primordial awareness, or other terms that are synonymous. She does not mention who this goddess is, but she is most likely a wisdom deity. And not only that, but a wisdom deity that causes wisdom to develop in one. Manjushri is the bodhisattva that personifies this type of wisdom deity, that practicing him and saying his mantra causes wisdom to increase in one. And so I am thinking that she is that kind of a deity, perhaps a deity like Prajnaparamita, the perfection of wisdom. So she enters through that gate, and there she sees a Chenrezig, and he's sitting on a lotus of 100,000, quote, spreading petals. Now, 100,000 spreading petals are a lot of petals. And the point here being that in this realm, there is this idea of vastness, that where the palace has a throne made out of 100,000 petals, and yet it's not crowded. There's plenty of room, and the mind can accommodate something of this size, that it is not beyond um, experiencing. I think that's a good word to use, that it seems, you might say, totally in place in this type of setting. So think of a very vast mind. Enlightened mind is very vast, very spacious, unobstructed. And this is what is being expressed here. Small mind is confused mind, and this is a mind that's in a small box. And this is one reason why we have trouble visualizing and imagining, for instance, immeasurable offerings, filling up an immeasurable amount of space made by immeasurable offering goddesses, and so on and so forth, that a confused mind is actually quite small and just can't really handle this. And the idea is to get out of our box and start seeing things the way they really are. So the room is full of unsurpassable offerings of the highest quality, which would be in the God realms, the highest quality. Let me what she was saying is that the room was full of offerings that were even better, and vaster, and higher than in the highest God realms. They were vast, incalculable in number and in size and in quality. She describes Chenrezig the way that we visualize him, with his clothing, his ornaments. He has a deer skin on his shoulder. And it's interesting that here it is described as an elk skin. And the point of this skin is that this particular animal is noted for its gentleness and its kindness and compassion. And before I read this, I had thought this was a mythical animal, but here in this book, it is, this animal is treated as an actual living animal that you could find over in that part of the world, an antelope. And she sees this this scene with Chenrezig in the middle. She sees that Chenrezig is really no different from her Root Lama. And this is an important point, that our Root Lama is Karmapa, and Karmapa is considered an emanation of Chenrezig. And so when we are visualizing Chenrezig, it is fine to feel that you are actually in the presence of Karmapa along with Chenrezig, because there is no difference between the two of them. The Dalai Lama is also considered an emanation of Chenrezig. Now, there is a difference here in terms of the retinue of Chenrezig. In the Yungne, there is a retinue of the five Buddhas, five Dhyana Buddhas. But here to the right is Mandi Dharma, who holds a gem, very much like Chenrezig, hands like that. To the left is the Vidyadhari, and that means supporter of wisdom. That this is the holder of the mantra of awareness and is considered a daughter of Chenrezig. Then behind is Amitabha, and Chenrezig is in Amitabha's Buddha family. And in front is another goddess, and it is Shadak Sharia. Let me spell this: Shadak Shrai. Shadak Shadak Shari. And she is the goddess of the Mani mantra and is Chenrezig's consort. So that is the setting, the scene that we are now in with Dawa Drolma and her escort, White Tara. And Tara gives her an important instruction at this time. Dawa Drolma makes prostrations and offerings as she is instructed by Tara, and she is instructed to recite aspiration prayers for a positive karmic connection with Chenrezig. So Dawa Drolma recites a 7-branch prayer. And we are familiar with 7-branch prayers. They are very common in Tibetan Buddhism. The first branch is homage and prostrations. The second one is offerings. The third one is confessing negative actions. The fourth branch of the 7-branch prayer is going to be rejoicing in the merit of other people, both bodhisattvas and Buddhas, as well as ordinary people, the merit that any being has accumulated. We rejoice in all of that merit. Then we ask for the Buddhas to teach the Dharma, to turn the wheel of Dharma. And then in the next branches, we ask them to remain and avoid demonstrating nirvana. And the last one is to dedicate all the merit that chanting the first 6 branches has created. We dedicate it to the benefit of all beings. So that's a standard 7-branch prayer. And after saying the 7-branch prayer, she asks for Chenrezig's blessings in this way, quote, "I beseech you, in all lifetimes, grant me the most sublime blessing, never to be separate from you." So that is a very important request. And we are fortunate if we can have that same request of Chenrezig to never be separated from him. The Tibetans feel that Chenrezig is the protector of Tibet, by the way, and he protects Tibet through his limitless compassion. So he responds and says that all who prostrate and worship him, he will lead them to the realm of bliss, Dawa Chen. And he promises to especially help the defenseless, those that are really suffering. But now to help beings, there is this element of receptivity. And what this means is that in order to benefit from Chenrezig's compassion, in order for him to lead you to Dawa Chen, you have to be receptive. If you are out in a lake and you can't swim and you are in danger of drowning, if someone would throw you one of those donut-shaped life preservers that has a rope on the end of it, and if you grab that life preserver, then the person who threw it out can pull the rope in and save you. But if you just keep thrashing around and screaming help and don't grab it, then you cannot be helped. So it is really important to realize that you have to do your part and you have to become receptive for this connection with Chenrezig, any of the other deities, and great lamas and ordinary lamas. For this connection to work, you have to be receptive. So he says that meditating on his form, recalling his name, reciting the 6-syllable mantra, and performing Yungne will make a connection with him, and he will lead you to Amitabha's realm at the time of death. This is very important. Then he talks about a dark age and there not being much virtue nowadays, that now the world is full of suffering and diseases are rampant, incurable diseases and so forth. And at the present time, it really does seem like suddenly the world has gotten darker in the last few years. But now this was an experience that happened in the early 20th century. And even at that time, it was felt that it has been a dark age for a long time. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche also talked about dark ages. And actually, the prediction is that it's just going to get darker and darker and darker. And eventually, the Buddha's teachings will entirely disappear from this human realm. And then because of impermanence, a new Buddha will appear and the teachings then will be reestablished and so on. But this is what is being referred to here about this being a dark age, that there's not much virtue, that the world is full of suffering, and so forth, that things are not looking good from a Buddhist cosmological perspective. It's also important to remember that the suffering that we are experiencing is a result of our own confusion, that enlightened beings do not suffer. So then he gives some advice. He says that you have, and she's talking to Dawa Drolma, and he says, you have a precious human birth. Don't squander it. Practice while you can. And among other things, what makes human birth precious is that you are able to come in contact with Buddhism and the Buddha's teachers, and that you have enough leisure time that you can practice, and your suffering isn't so great that it significantly interferes with being able to practice. And there are a lot of others that go with this. I'm just kind of reviewing a few things, but the point is that it's a tremendous opportunity, and you don't want to squander it. You want to take advantage of this very, very precious position that you are in the present time. He says, use mindfulness, alertness, and heedfulness. And these are talked about a lot in reference to meditation. Mindfulness, alertness could also be substituted with awareness. And heedfulness is that your mindfulness is paying attention to the technique. The alertness or awareness is maintaining awareness of what is happening, not just the technique, that you're maintaining awareness or alertness of the breathing, of your body, of the room that you're practicing in, and whatever else is going on in the room. But when you get distracted, the heedfulness is that you quickly and gently bring yourself back to the mindfulness of the breath. So it takes all three. If you just have mindfulness, there can be little awareness. You can even almost blank out. And without heedfulness, when you do get distracted, you never come back. So he compares them to water and manure of virtue. He talks about virtue here. And the idea is that water and manure are essential components for plants to grow and to then bear fruit or reach maturity and produce what the person that planted intended these crops to produce. He says, contemplate impermanence, that by contemplating impermanence, this will make your virtuous behavior grow. He says that belief and faith are virtue's roots. So he goes through this analogy of growing crops. Altruism and compassion are the trunk of the plant that you are growing, or the tree that you are growing. The two types of bodhicitta are the heartwood of this, in this case, a tree. And the types of bodhicitta, first of all, are aspiration bodhicitta, the aspiration that I will do this practice, or I will exert myself. I will do what I can so that I can travel the path. And then the other is engagement, and that means that you actually do the practice, that you actually meditate, chant a puja, or whatever it is that is necessary so that you can evolve and grow and travel the path. So these two types of bodhicitta, aspiration and engagement, are the heartwood of this tree. The six perfections are the branches and the twigs. And then the dedication of one's virtue, rejoicing in others' good fortunes and their virtue, and having proper motivation. These are like the leaves of virtue. And then there are flowers on this tree, and they are considered the four ways of influencing others. And so this list is as follows: giving generously what is necessary, speaking pleasantly, engaging in activities that benefit others, and then acting within the customs and expectations of others. And that last one is really quite important, that in most cases, a bodhisattva blends in with the culture and group that he is mixing with. There are exceptions of this, but it is important to blend in, meet others' expectations within reason, and so forth, carry out the customs instead of being someone that keeps doing things in such a way that is both surprising to other people. Other people might think it's out of place, out of order, and can raise problems with other people as well. Even though what you are doing might seem very reasonable to yourself. So then the fruit of this is emptiness and supreme compassion. And this leads to ultimately a path to Dawa Chen, the land, the pure realm of Amitabha. And all of this is because of interdependence. By doing these things, you end up in Dawa Chen because of interdependence. You have created the causes for rebirth in Dawa Chen. So he says, then Chenrezig, then, this is quite a long talk of his, but it's just full of very useful information, that there are obstacles that can arise that we need to avoid. One is denying cause and effect. And since cause and effect is karma, it is denying karma. It could be as simple as saying that, well, things just happen randomly. There's not a higher power that causes things to happen. But it doesn't matter what I do. Other obstacles are anger, aggression, enmity, and envy. He says that these kill the fruit. And the fruit is emptiness and supreme compassion. And so that's what is being said here, that anger, aggression, enmity, and envy kill this fruition or any possibility of reaching fruition in your own practice. And then he mentions a few other things here. He says that attachment to honor and gain, being ensnared as a householder, that these things can eat away at oneself from within. And he finishes up here with a few more obstacles. And these are pride, arrogance, haughtiness, that these spoil virtue. So we need to be aware of these and let go of them and do what we can to keep them from taking root in our mind stream and becoming habitual. Then he goes down a list of things that are that help us. The three types of transcendent knowledge, the four qualities, and joy in the success of others. And he comes back and he stresses again the need to reflect on impermanence so that we don't get too caught up in our daily lives and our possessions and so forth, that we realize all of this is temporary and it's just due to causes and conditions, and it may not be here tomorrow. And reflecting on impermanence, then, if we really do a profound reflection, leads to renunciation, because we realize that there is a lot of futility that occurs in samsara, and that it's just not useful to spend a lot of time or a lot of money and perhaps energy on doing things in the world that have no real lasting effect, that because of impermanence, it will be gone soon. So let's see, I covered impermanence, renunciation, and then of course discussed with samsara, and that just is more of what I just talked about. And that is realizing that, well, samsara can offer temporary pleasure and happiness. It always disappears. And at the time of disappearance or soon after, it may be actually more difficult than if we never had it to begin with. And then he says that the best motivation that we can have is by faith, devotion, and compassion. If our motivation has these behind them, then we are doing very well. And then there is a talk about the same Chenrezig practice ends as we arise from the dissolving the mantra visualization, and that is that the all form is the body of Chenrezig, or the body of the deity in a more general sense, that all sound is the speech of the deity, and that all thought is the mind of the deity. And then there's a dedication of merit. Then after that, he says, strive for 4 types of virtuous practice, which are A, don't cling to this life. Don't be seduced by evil. Don't reinforce the 8 worldly concerns. And these are really easy to get sucked in by praise and blame fame and obscurity, gain and loss, pleasure, pain, that it's so easy to get sucked into them or to get out of being sucked into them. He says, don't make all kinds of plans. That sometimes we get carried away and have all kinds of plans, and we never spend enough time with Dharma activities. We just get kind of swept away by plans and what we would like to do and so forth. It's also a sign of dissatisfaction and grasping, wanting more. And he says, practice the Dharma wholeheartedly with our body, speech, and mind. And that this is the greatest kindness that you can do for yourself. And that is very important to remember when we practice, that this is something that, although we may be visualizing it benefiting other beings, that this is the best thing that we can do for ourselves, because it helps reduce our egotistical clinging. Now then, she does an aspiration prayer to become just like Chenrezig. And after that, Chenrezig says that he is present wherever people have an interest in him. So don't be concerned about him ignoring you, that if you have devoted interest in him, he is there. She then recites a short prayer, and it is the last 4 lines that we chant when we do the Mahamudra lineage supplication. And the English is something like, in all my lives, may I be born close to the perfect Guru, and so forth. Now, at this point, she switches to giving her own teaching on his Pure Land. And she quotes some sutras that explain more about Chenrezig. And so one of them, the English translation of the title is the Exalted Sutra on the Array of Ums. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. UMS, Ums. And in this sutra, the Buddha explained Chenrezig's power and his ability. So to go into that a little bit, how she teaches on this, and again, this is her teachings. This is not Chenrezig talking, that he can manifest as any kind of being he wants to. And he doesn't necessarily need to just manifest as a human being. He can manifest as an inanimate object, as well as an animal or a plant. And that calling his name, Chenrezig's name, once is equal to calling the names of the Buddhas. And this is enough of Buddhas that it would equal the number of grains of sand in the Ganges River. When we were studying Taisito Rinpoche's book, Ground, Path, and Fruition, he talked about at one point there being a tremendous amount of Buddhas that attain realization at any moment in time. And so This is the reference here to as many grains of sand as in the Ganges River. That would be a tremendous number of names, and the amount of merit that would be created by doing that can also be created by reciting Chenrezig's name once. That seems a lot simpler. The point here is that it's always good to recite his name, say his mantra, think of him, visualize him, and so forth. And as for the power of his mantra, that it's extremely beneficial to recite the mantra, that obstacles, malevolent influences, even illnesses are dispelled by reciting his mantra. And it also can bestow longevity and positive qualities, cause positive qualities to grow. And finally, I am going to talk here about the long Dharani, and that is the one that we recite when we do Nyungne. That reciting that, some of the benefits are that it leads to actually seeing the Buddhas at the time of one's death, that they appear to you. The second is that it blocks rebirth in the lower states, the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, and the hell realm. And third, that it avoids experiencing the horrors, terrible parts of the bardo. And it can lead to being reborn in Dawa Chapter. So these are all well worth reciting the mantra for, and even doing a Nyungne or two. Let's see here. If you see, hear, or touch the 6-syllable mantra, that it plants a seed of enlightenment in your mind stream. And before you become enlightened, you pass through a series of noble births and then do swiftly attain enlightenment. And to compare some more parts of this Nyungne fasting ritual, he says, quote, by performing the fasting ritual just once, one eliminates 40,000 aeons of wandering in cyclic existence and purifies all karma and obscurations due to such actions as the 5 that entail immediate retribution. So even the most serious actions can be purified by practicing the Nyungne. So physical involvement in the practice removes physical obscurations, and it prevents birth as a preta. Silence purifies verbal obscurations, and this prevents birth as an animal. And then recitation of the Dharani purifies mental obscurations and prevents birth as a hell being. And so this is why he said earlier that doing this prevents birth in the lower realms. Now, he finishes up this chapter by talking about the benefits of being a server and a sponsor of Nyungne. So to go through those very briefly, serving hot cereal in the morning, the third morning when we're breaking a fast. And this would usually be done in the shrine room. And so if you would help serve a meal, that breaking the fast meal on the third morning, that there is tremendous merit that you accumulate. Uh, he says that serving the meal is like serving an eighth bodhisattva. This is a very highly realized bodhisattva. And that serving a meal on the day that we can eat, where we've taken sojong vows, that serving that meal is like serving an arhat. Being a sponsor of the young name, one will not be reborn in the three lower realms, and that you will be endowed with the attitude of a bodhisattva. And that from then on, you will have, quote, inexhaustible fortune in all your future rebirths. And in that series of fortunate rebirths, you will perfect the qualities of generosity and swiftly attain enlightenment. And here is a quote to end this section. In view of these and other inconceivable benefits and advantages in the perfectly pure pursuit of virtue, rejoice and exert yourself day and night without distraction, motivated by intense and unhesitating altruism, faith, and devotion. And finally, it ends with wishing that we who are hearing this, in this case, reading it, that we pursue meaningful endeavors in our life and use our body, speech, and mind to worship Chenrezig. So with that, I am going to open it up to question and answers. The question was, well, if Dawa Chen, not even the concept of suffering, it just doesn't make sense, because Chenrezig, his whole being is about eliminating suffering from the six realms and so on and so forth. And I would say this, that this is an indication that even the concept does not exist in Dawa Chen, the concept of suffering, of how effective he is, that he can pull you out from being suffering immensely to it's like not even a memory, that it just doesn't, it isn't part of it. Now, it is said also, and this might be somewhat contradictory, but as you attain more and more higher levels of enlightenment and realization in Dawa Chen, your compassion really starts to develop, and then you have the resolve to be reborn in samsara and bring other people out too. So there obviously is this awareness that even though suffering doesn't exist, there's some people that still are around that think it does. To follow up that question and answer is that suffering is used to motivate us to practice. And so if you are in Dawa Chen and there's absolutely no suffering, why would you want to practice? And first of all, there is just one opportunity, one constant opportunity to practice. Whatever is going on, it has to do with the Dharma. All sound is the sound of Dharma, Dharma teachings, and so forth. You can't avoid it, and it just becomes natural. And so you might say your Buddha nature at this point is taking over, this uncontrolled desire to bring out your best qualities. I like to use the example of the sun and the rays, that the sun doesn't choose to radiate. It has to radiate. The light has to go away from the sun. And you could say shine on everyone. And so it's that kind of a situation that you built up this momentum, the snowball is going downhill, and there you go. I do have one other comment, which what you had said earlier came to mind, and that there was a European philosopher, I think it was Leibniz, that said, I think, therefore I am. And I'm going to give a Buddhist corollary on that. And it is, I suffer, therefore I am.